Great, okay.
So, Shawn and flow monitoring. Shawn Stenhouse.
Hello everybody, Shawn Stenhouse, BC Conservation Foundation, fisheries biologist there, and do a lot of work with Faye and our group there doing streamflow monitoring and whatever else she gets us to do. So basically monitoring streamflow in a bunch of the systems on the Englishman River. Do a lot of work sort of through all of Vancouver Island, but sort of focusing in on the Englishman Watershed with Faye's group here. So basically it's water for fish, and then I guess for everything else after the fish are done. You know, you're going to want water, especially in the Englishman River. It's like drinking water is one of the main things coming from there, and then try to balance that with sort of the water for fish through the bottom end, and then other stuff for agricultural and recreational purposes too. So the more we know about it, the better informed decisions we can make, and without the data, well, you can't really say much unless you have it. So the boring stuff is what are we doing? The main thing is we want to know how much water is coming through these systems. I'll sort of make this really brief. Basically, you want to measure how much water comes past a point every second. To do that, you slice the river into a bunch of little sections, measure the depth, the width, and the velocity, and then that gives you, and then you add those all up to get the whole total discharge coming through the system. Once you know how much water is coming through at a certain time, as Gilles was mentioning before with his groundwater work, we've got level loggers installed on a lot of these systems, on the main stem, Englishman, Shelly Creek, on Center Creek, and then probably in Morrison Creek, and then maybe South Englishman River too. And then what happens is this will measure the water level at a certain point where this is installed. And then if you go through and measure the discharge, you can tell how high the water was at that certain point, and they can produce a staged discharge. From that, you can convert all water levels to discharge and produce a hydrograph, so you can know what the water level is throughout the year. So in the winter, it's going really high. In the summer, it's really low and high. This is for the South Englishman River. We did a bunch of work from 2008 to 2012. So the graph on the right here is basically from January 1st to December 31st. And this is basically the water flow going through South Englishman on a daily event. So you're getting up to 35 cubic meters per second in January and December, and then in the low flow period of June, July, August, it's down to liters per second. So, and then the graph on the right there shows the low flow right there, which is basically 50 liters per second as opposed to 35 cubic meters per second, which is 3,500 liters per second. So I'm not sure how well this is going to show, but this sort of shows all the sites in the Englishman watershed that we're dealing on. There's the 5 groundwater sites on the main stem Englishman that Gilles was talking about. So we're trying to measure the water levels above and below the faults to see what effect, if there is any, of groundwater adding water to the main stem flow, the surface flow. Also, we've got, as mentioned before, Shelly Creek, which I think most of you are fairly aware of, and Center Creek too, and then possibility of putting stuff in on Morrison Creek, and maybe reinstating the South Englishman data too. So the red circle is Center Creek. Had a logger in there for the last couple of years. It's been measuring water level, but not much. We haven't been out there to do discharge measurements lately, where the volunteers come in, I guess. Just kind of give on Center Creek in the center there, we got the concrete housing that we installed level logger in the stream, so it measures water level, and then you got to come out and do a discharge measurement, as I mentioned before, at different water levels to produce the curve. So the first one was done with a flow tracker as an acoustic Doppler velocity meter, and then that's at the higher flows, and this is a flume to measure at low flows. So the first one was at about 1.2 cubic meters per second, which is 1,200 liters per second, and we used the flume for measuring, I think this was 6 liters a second. So Center Creek is, with many of these smaller streams on Vancouver Island, it's either really high or really low in the summer. So the next one is Shelly Creek. once again by the red circle. Not sure how well these are turning out or not, but the center photo there is one from Faye, I guess, during those rains, I guess last week or last couple of weeks. Not sure what's going through there, but it's probably about 500 liters per second. And then the pictures on the outside, the bottom left is 2 liters per second. And you can measure that with a bucket, so you basically fill the bucket, time it. It's a lot easier at that point. So. And then when it's higher again, you use a meter to do it from there. So I did a bunch of sort of spot measurements on Morrison Creek over, I think, between 2010 and 2012. And it gets down to, I think the lowest I measured was half a liter a second. So it's pretty anemic during the summer events there. So, so being able to monitor that a bit better to get a better understanding of sort of water conservation on there. The Morrison Creek is one of the watersheds that has a lot of agricultural influence on the upper end. Not that there's huge withdrawals or if they're using what they're licensed to, but you know, if they were to be taking out what they're licensed to, you know, it could be sucking the creek dry, which is good to monitor. And then South Englishman River, which is Center Creek, is a tributary to South Englishman, then South Englishman is tributary to Englishman River. And once again, we sort of monitored that for a few years, so it's be easy to sort of monitor it again. But I just wanted to put these couple pictures in just to show sort of the different flows. The log on the bottom right here is part of that log on the left there, just it's taken back a bit, but just to show you the different flows of, you know, probably 12 liters per second, 20 liters per second, up to about 3 or 4 cubic meters per second. And then this is just sort of following with Gilles' groundwater. The sites are here. He kind of sort of mentioned what we're doing, so with his end of things. So basically what my end of the work will be doing with that, with Faye's group, is installing these water level loggers to monitor water level, and then we'll do discharge measurements to produce stage discharge curves at each one, and then we'll be able to see if there's any sort of additions or subtractions of water between each site, hopefully. So, of which we have 3 sites in, and I'll just sort of go through this quick, and then there's 2 sites we still have to do. But once the flows recede a bit, back in the spring here a bit, hopefully we'll get those in and carry on with the project. So there's upper site, picture, second to the bottom site. There's a bunch of large woody debris structures that were installed over 10 years ago in the river, and just mounted the loggers to those so they're easy to access. Next. And then these 2 sites here are the ones, and they're sort of upstream and downstream of the Englishman River Falls Provincial Park. So we have to sort of find sort of a decent access sites and decent sort of flow monitoring sites there. And then this was just back in July, we did a BCCF with MVIHES, did sort of a flow monitoring sort of workshop on the lower Englishman River. This is near the intake off of Turner Road there. And yeah, so Faye sort of asked if I could go sort of show people how it's done, and like I say, I'm open to that anytime anybody is interested in doing it again. So, little blue outline there, that's Faye hiding in the bush. Gotcha, Faye. So there you go. Any questions? That's all I'm saying right now.
Do you have any data from 20 or 30 years ago to compare with what you got find today?
He was asking if there's any previous data from 20, 30 years ago to sort of compare with, and none that I'm aware of, and if there is, it's probably all sort of spot, sort of one-off sets of data. There hasn't been too huge of intensive surveying on this, I think. The biggest one would be the Water Survey of Canada site down at the Orange Bridge in Parksville there. I think I'm not sure how long that's been going for, but it's got a good series of trends, so you know that end of things, what sort of the yearly discharge is, or the daily discharge over the years. And I just wanted to, I guess one more thing is just to sort of give Julie from Regional District and Manual sort of a thank you to, because the level loggers were provided by the RDN for this program too. So.